I've talked a lot on this channel at this point about my passionate love for both 2010's Tron Legacy, as well as the spin-off series Tron Uprising, which released shortly after it. However, something I haven't talked quite as much about is my love for 1982's Tron, the original film that started the whole franchise. I, however, didn't always love this movie. As a kid, I was completely confused by it and the fact that it barely tied into the Tron Legacy film at all, and it took me a really long time before I came around on it. However, I ultimately have, and have come to love the film, and really want to talk about the merchandise for the movie now. I remember watching the original 1982 Tron as a kid, soon after seeing Legacy in theaters, and being baffled by it. I couldn't possibly fathom that a film wouldn't lead directly into its sequel. I was so used to Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, which were self-contained trilogies which told one continuous story, whereas the original Tron was made nearly 30 years before Legacy, and the entire look and feel of the two movies is entirely different. Some of the characters remain the same, but in very different ways. I was extremely confused by the fact that Clue appears very briefly in the original Tron movie and immediately gets derezzed. I just couldn't fathom the fact that these two movies felt completely different from one another, and I think I kind of just shut down on it immediately and didn't really give it the time of day. That, and I really couldn't get over the light cycle effects at the time. I don't think it's honestly that terrible in retrospect, and I genuinely love most of the special effects of the movie, but the light cycles are really the only thing that stand out to me as being not appealing. That and the music isn't as memorable as the original Legacy soundtrack. However, I have come around to liking it too. When I rewatched the original Tron a few weeks ago, I discovered how much I genuinely love this movie. While it doesn't necessarily tie directly into Legacy, I think a lot of the same themes continue throughout the film, and the aesthetic of the grid is more alike than I remember. And I think having Tron Uprising kind of bridge the look of the two makes it a much more easy pill to swallow, the kind of evolution of the grid. And I like the idea that it kind of evolved with technology. So in retrospect, I love the original Tron. However, one thing I don't really have an attachment to is any merchandise from the original Tron movie. While I grew up with Tron Legacy and I love the merchandise and have talked about it extensively at this point, I didn't really know much about the original Tron film merchandise. And that's why I'm making this video here. I did a little bit of research for this video, as well as purchasing a couple of my own figures, and I want to talk about them here today. Let's start with the original toys, released back in 1982 to tie into the original Tron film. Released were a set of four figures and two light cycles. The four figures included Kevin Flynn, Tron himself, Sark, and a warrior, who was one of the Sark guards from the film. The figures themselves were in a 3 3/4 inch scale, so they kind of fit in with the Star Wars figures, which were popular at the time. They included removable discs that could be attached on their backs, and the warrior also included a staff. Tomy rendered these figures in a translucent plastic and included a painted finish that kind of illuminated the lights seen in the movie. While not perfect, I really like the effect these action figures give. It's certainly not accurate to the look of the grid from the original 1982 movie, but it does have its own unique aesthetic, and I think it matches the look of the original grid in ways that matter. Also released were a set of two light cycles. One was red and one was yellow. These were vehicles that were in scale with the figures, and the figures could be placed inside, and a ripcord could be used to launch them. I unfortunately don't have these action figures in hand. They are from the 1980s, which makes them kind of hard to come across anymore, especially complete. If you want in-hand footage of the action figures, though, I highly suggest checking out Retroblasting's video, as they have lots of great footage of the action figures and the vehicles, and go over the features really well as some of the drawbacks of them. A few years later, NECA would re-release the original 1980s figures, and it even included a new color for the light cycle, which was awesome to add more variety to the original lineup. However, I certainly wished they would have released a Yori figure, as she's the most obvious missing piece of the original set. It would have been awesome to see what Tomy could have done with this toy line and back in the 1980s had it succeeded. I think it had the makings of a Star Wars-esque mega hit. However, the Tron movie itself just wasn't as action-packed, nor did it really catch on in the way to justify it to continue making toys. It's a shame though, as I would have loved to get more larger vehicles like the tank and Recognizer, as well as figures like Yori and Clue in the toy line. Outside of those original figures and molds, which would be re-released later down the line, there was very little Tron merchandise for a while. That was until Diamond Select stepped in and made a beautiful set of 7-inch figures based on the original Tron. These were done in a few different waves and different ways. The original wave was a Walgreens exclusive and included three characters: Tron, Kevin Flynn, and Sark. These only included discs as accessories and were fairly basic, however, included everything you really needed to get a satisfying figure based on the film. Later down the line, when they would re release these figures, they would also include Infiltrator Flynn in the lineup in place of the original Kevin Flynn, which I thought was really cool as it added some variety to this figure. Included in the second deluxe wave were also special effect throwing disc parts, which were really cool and helped illustrate the effect of the disc battles shown in the movie, which was an awesome touch. We're also getting a third run of these figures just now, which you can actually pre-order now from Diamond Select. This time, the figures are done in this really cool arcade packaging. And this time they also go back to including the original Kevin Flynn, so he's available for the first time since that initial release. And you can get the effect parts in new colors. I definitely recommend checking out these figures and pre-ordering them if you can, if you want an alternative to the super expensive HasLab that's currently running. Diamond Select has gone further though and offered up a couple exclusives. The first of these exclusives was just a 3-pack, but of the original three figures. However, they're shown in an arcade packaging all battling each other, which is a really fun detail, and I really like it as it ties into the original arcade game of Tron, which in some ways was even more successful than the film itself. The other two exclusives also harken back to the early 80s aesthetic and kind of culture of the original Tron film. The first of these is a Tron done up in the style of the VHS cover, where he has all black coloring and orange lines instead of the standard blue lines. This is a fun variant of Tron, one that I haven't personally added to my collection, as it doesn't appear in the film, but I do think it looks pretty cool. The other exclusive release was a 3-pack of the original three molds and characters. This time they were actually done up to represent the original Tomy releases of these characters. So the three figures were done in translucent plastic with neon lights drawn on them to sort of give it that grid effect. These were really cool in my opinion as they harken back to the original figures, and I think it's a cool way to tie into the sort of release and nostalgia of that original film. I would have loved to have seen Diamond Select continue with this toy line, and especially I would have loved to have seen them eventually get around to doing the Sark Guard as well as Yori, and maybe even give us Ram later down the line, which could easily be repainted into a couple generic programs. I think that would have been awesome. And Diamond Select even did tease that we would have got a second wave back on Twitter a while ago. However, I'm wondering if that ultimately didn't just become the second release of the figures, which included Infiltrator Flynn and the effect parts, which, if that's all that meant, is pretty disappointing. At this rate, with Hasbro getting the license, I'm surprised we're even getting the third run of these figures in the arcade style packaging, so I would secure those now if you can, because I really don't know if Hasbro is going to continue their Tron line long enough to get good versions of these characters in this scale. Two oddball releases I forgot to mention from Diamond Select are 3-pack releases of Tron and Sark, but which also include Disney characters from Kingdom Hearts. These were a fun tie-in as guess Tron and Sark appear in the Kingdom Hearts game, and it was an easy way for Diamond Select to reuse the original molds in a cool new paint scheme. I don't personally have these as I have no attachment to Kingdom Hearts, but I do think it's a cool way for the Tron brand to seep into more of pop culture. In recent years, Super 7 has done an absolutely beautiful set of Tron releases that I would kill to get my hands on. They're an absolutely wonderful balance of the original Tomy figures, but also look a little closer to what I would expect a Star Wars-esque Kenner toy line to look like. I think they're absolutely wonderfully done, and the light cycles look even better than the original Tomy releases, in my opinion. And the best part, this is the most complete toy line there is, in my opinion, at the moment. As not only do you get the standard Tron, Kevin Flynn, and Sark, but the guard is also included. The repaint of Kevin Flynn Infiltrator Flynn is here, but also Yori and even Ram, which I believe makes this the only Ram figure available at the moment. This is an absolutely wonderful toy line, one which I wish would get released at big box retailers or at least specialty online retailers. But at the moment, it's currently exclusive to Disney World at the Late Cycle Run gift shop, which is a huge bummer. That gift shop has so much cool merchandise I would kill to get my hands on. However, I simply am not going to pay the ridiculous prices just to get into Hollywood studios to purchase a couple of action figures. While not action figures per se, Funko has given us a few pop statues of Tron characters and have given us a pretty complete line in most regards. The initial wave included Tron and Sark. These were glow in the dark and both had metallic chases, which look awesome. A second wave was released pretty recently. I actually just recently found these at Target the other day, and it includes Kevin Flynn, Yori, and Tron on a light cycle. I think this is a pretty cool set of Funkos. However, I don't personally own them, as I'm pretty over Funko Pops at the moment. There was also a Tron figure released in their Mystery Minis sci-fi figure wave, I believe, which is really not for me, but it is some piece of merchandise released for the original Tron. And then, of course, there is the $260 Haslab based on the original Tron film that's up for backing right now. I have talked about that in a video before, but the short version is I'm extremely disappointed in this HasLab. I think it strikes an imperfect balance of being way too expensive and not including nearly enough stuff. For the price, I would have liked a complete line of figures. However, there's some pretty blatant missing parts, such as the Sark Guard and Ram. I'm also pretty disappointed in the display stand. I would have much rather had a vehicle like the Recognizer or the Master Control Program, as he's never had a toy of the at all, despite being the main villain of the movie. I know he is more of an idea in that film, however, it would be cool to have some representation of him. And that's pretty much it. For a big film released in the 1980s, there's really not that much Tron merch out there compared to other big powerhouse franchises like Star Wars, of course, Star Trek, Predator, Terminator, and lots of other big 1980s franchises. That's why I really gravitate to Tron. It's sort of the black sheep of the 1980s, but it still has gotten lots of recognition in recent years. I think the standout of the merchandise based on this original Tron film is probably the Super 7 line, as I do really feel like it's the most complete, and I love the look of these figures as they really look like a perfect balance between the Tomy figures and Diamond Select figures, which I think is a really cool touch. I really hope Hasbro gives us something else based on the original Tron in the future, as I think most of the fandom is pretty unsatisfied with the HasLab. But now I really love to hear from you guys. What's your favorite bit of merchandise based on the original Tron? Your favorite toy line? Do you like the original Tomy slash NECA figures? Do you like what Diamond Select did? Do you like the Super 7 figures, but can't get a hold of them like myself? Or are you a fan of the new HasLab and are planning on backing it? Please let me know down below in the comments, as I'd love to hear from you. If you've enjoyed this Tron retrospective on the merchandise from the original 1982 film, please consider leaving a like and maybe subscribing. I've been making lots of Tron content, and I also hope to make lots more toy deep dives into lots of toy lines that I love but don't see many people talking about. Thank you so much, guys, and I hope to catch you in the next video.